sort of stupid and don't understand what the supply chain crisis is. I worked at that White House for 4 years. We never even heard of such a thing. There was no supply chain crisis.
That's Kellyanne Conway. You remember her? Well, how could you forget? You got to remember that she's a massive liar because she's still doing it to you right now. She says there, I think she said we never even heard of a supply chain crisis. That's weird. You should know what at least the term means. But she's implying there that under Donald Trump, there were no supply chain issues. Well, the thing is, in some ways, it feels like it was forever ago. This last year has felt really long. I still remember some of what happened literally just last year. And it turns out that there were some concerns about supply chains. Some of them were actually legal concerns. For instance, for Jared Kushner, who was sued over his failed coronavirus supply chain task force. It was so bad, he was sued over it. But Kellyanne Conway can't bother to remember that. So what was he being sued about? Well, in March, he, for some reason I'll never understand, was put in charge of all this. And so he recruited a bevy of private sector volunteers with little to no relevant experience to assist in the administration's efforts to procure medical and protective equipment that had been in short supply. They cared so little about whether this equipment was ever acquired that they gave it to Jared Kushner, and he botched the entire thing, which led to some throwbacks we're gonna do here. For instance, the fact that nurses had to use snorkel masks, pool noodles, and trash bags as PPE. In the richest country in history, our nurses wore Glad bags during a pandemic. That was the issue we had with our supply chain. But look, it was definitely a medical thing. It affected that. For a period, it affected ventilators. You might have had a lot of trouble getting hand sanitizer or masks. There were massive public health related supply chain issues, but it also went way wider than that. Let's go to some random things. Did you try to buy a bicycle last year? I know it seems random, but there were massive supply chain problems in bicycles. Actually, most exercise equipment became very difficult to get. A little bit more specific to just your life in general. I'm gonna show you a picture and I want you to tell me what you think of when you see this picture. Let's go to this Cottonelle. What does that make you think of when you think of 2020? Nothing? Just the ease at getting and using toilet paper? Oh, it was smooth times. I didn't buy toilet paper from China on eBay. Nobody must have, because there were no supply chain issues whatsoever. In fact, I've been trying to give some examples for Kellyanne Conway so that she can reckon a little bit with the history, the very recent history of the Trump administration. But if you want more, there is literally a section on Wikipedia of shortages related to the COVID-19 pandemic with a lot of detail. And by the way, pointing this out, aside from the stuff with Jared Kushner and the fact that Trump and Republican governors didn't care about this is not entirely on them. You can have supply chain issues during the worst pandemic of our lives. On some level, people will understand that. But if we're gonna understand that, if we're gonna extend some goodwill towards you in 2020, you should understand that we are unfortunately still in that pandemic. And it is still unfortunately affecting supply chains on a lot of different things. Rubber and steel, board games, all sorts of things, consumer products. International travel and shipping is still very difficult. And so if I can extend that to him, hopefully she can try to come to grips with why that might still be affecting things here in 2021, especially when they're the ones who are helping to continue this pandemic.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.